are the Borg. Lower your shields and surrender your ships. We will add your biological and technological distinctiveness to our own. Your culture will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile.
Shalom חברים. So, today Parashat Noach. And if you recognized the clip we just watched, you're probably in good company. That is, that you're a Star Trek fan and guilty as charged. And what we saw there is perhaps one of the most terrifying and fantastic and imaginative enemy in the Star Trek universe, which is the Borg. What is the Borg? The Borg is essentially a cybernetic collective that evolves by assimilating others, by assimilating other species. So what they do is that they are basically a combination of flesh and machine. And when they assimilate someone, they harnessed their scientific, technological, and biological traits to add to their own, with their goal being perfection. So they don't see that assimilation as conquest, but rather as evolution, with the goal, again, to perfect themselves. In the process, they erase completely the individuality of those that they assimilate, and they function as a hive mind. They're able to hear each other's thoughts and basically operate with all the collective knowledge of millions upon millions upon millions of what they call drones, former humanoids or human beings. And, you know, the reason I'm bringing the Borg here is that, and it's something I like about Star Trek in general, is that it really provokes a deep philosophical question. And I think that for me, perhaps the greatest philosophical question coming from the Borg is a perfect unity utopian or dystopian? And I think that the Star Trek would answer that, of course, this is dystopian, you know, with that cost that you pay for that unity. But with that, one should really pay close attention and think, isn't this dystopia is something that we in fact want? There's a lot of talks about being one, the oneness, about understanding each other, about thinking together, about adding to each other's knowledge. What's dystopian about that? So, our Torah portion has an answer. In Noach, and this comes later in the portion after the whole flood story, comes another famous story, which is the story of the Tower of Babel. And in that story, the story begins with a description of humanity actually reaching that utopian stage, or dystopian, if you will. And it says, "Vayehi chol haaretz safa achat udvarim achadim," which translates to everyone on earth had the same language and the same words. ויאמרו, הבה נבנה לנו עיר ומגדל, וראשו בשמיים, ונעשה לנו שם ונפוץ על פני כל הארץ. And they said, come, let us build a city and a tower, with its top in the sky, to make a name for ourselves, else we shall be scattered all over the world. וירד אדוני לראות את העיר ואת המגדל אשר בנו בני האדם. Adonai came down to look at the city and tower that humanity had built. ויאמר אדוני, הן עם אחד ושפה אחת לכולם, וזה החילם לעשות, ועתה לא ייבצר מהם כל אשר יזמו לעשות. And Adonai said, if as one people with one language for all, this is how they have begun to act, then nothing that they may propose to do will be out of their reach. Wow. So what happens here is that humans really achieve the perfect cooperation, understanding each other in one unity, functioning like the Borg, if you will, as a hive mind. And with that perfect unity and understanding, they were able to reach remarkable achievements. If you want to speak in modern terms, technological innovations that come from perfect cooperation, so much so that are able to transcend human nature itself and to become godlike, to become creators. Now, let's go to, as some of you who follow this channel may know, one of my favorite Torah commentators, Sforno. So what does Sforno have to say about that? Sforno explains that that perfect understanding was not simply that the people understood each other's language, meaning everyone who speaks English understand each other, and everyone who speaks, Hebrew understand each other. Here what Sforno says is that their understanding was a lot deeper than that. He said that they agreed on matters of philosophy and religion. So they have fundamental agreements with one another, which leads to think that when God descends and decides to break it apart, it's not some petty, oh, they're ascending high and they're reaching my level. No, it's not good that they agree. They need to disagree, which is a really profound thing if you think about it. And that brings me to John Stuart Mill. And of course his monumental work on liberty. So John Stuart Mill, born in 1806, died in 1873, and is considered the father of modern liberalism. And let's see what Mill has to say about that. So he writes, if all mankind minus one were of one opinion, and only one person were of the contrary opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person than he, if he had the power, would be justified in silencing mankind. Were an opinion a personal possession of no value except to the owner, if to be obstructed in the enjoyment of it were simply a private injury, it would make some difference whether the injury was inflicted only on a few persons or on many. But the peculiar evil of silencing the expression of an opinion is that it is robbing the human race, posterity as well as the existing generation, those who descend from the opinion, still more than those who hold it. If the opinion is right, they are deprived of the opportunity of exchanging error for truth. If wrong, they lose what is almost as great a benefit, the clearer perception and livelier impression of truth produced by its collision with error. So here is Mill obviously advocating free speech as a pillar of democracy, talks about the importance to a healthy development of society of even one opinion that is different. Now, when people think of democracy, if you are asked to define democracy, people usually, the first thing that comes to mind is majority rules, right? It's like the rule of the majority. However, so basically, and if we think about it, the rule of the majority is, yes, this is going to be the prevalent representation of a certain idea that exists in a given society, and it happens by casting a vote on it, right? That's how we would all define democracy. But the rule of the majority can never be the whole democratic story. In fact, by itself, it's extremely dangerous and oppressive. True democracy, and we have Mill to thank for laying it out for us, is the promise of the representation of minority voices, their consideration in the political process, and their respectful treatment. And so what Mill is claiming is that the different voices are so important is because either they challenge a certain truth and encourage us to revisit it, or if they pose an opinion that is wrong, it helps in strengthening our truth by having a mirror of the opposite argument. So when God confuses the languages in the Tower of Babel, he might have done it to prevent what Mill would call the tyranny of the majority. And you know, in fact, that our entire Jewish tradition is built on accounts of disputes. It built on disagreement. We have our entire Torah Sheba'al Peh, our entire Talmud is all accounts of disputes, of people who disagree with one another. And from these disputes, our wisdom rises. Now, Mill, who was a 19th century thinker, could not have predicted the social media echo chambers that we see right now, and perhaps for our era, this is a perfect representation of the danger in sweeping and blindly agreeing with one another and amplifying disagreement and basically shutting away different voices that are uncomfortable for us to confront. Now, the Star Trek Borg possesses a nightmarish portrait of a utopian oneness. An ideal which may produce tremendous achievements, but those will exist for the high price of crushing the individual. So perhaps the takeaway from our portion, Noach, is that we must dare to disagree, and especially when it's least comfortable for us. And that resistance is not futile. Shabbat Shalom.